Nu staat het regenwoud in Claggett Valley op de nominatie om kaal gekapt te worden. Veel groepen zijn er tegen, in het bijzonder de Indianen. Het is het dal van hun voorouders. Ze hebben er een sterke historische band mee. Joe Martin is visser. Door de kaalslag op de hellingen loopt de visserij terug.
Well, my father, he's been a fisherman, and we used to make his living by that. But now the fisheries resources, it's not very good anymore. It's going very bad. I think it's due to destruction of salmon habitat from the forest industry. Because, you look at Vancouver Island at one time with 89 major watersheds and valleys in it. Today there are only 6 left, 6 of these valleys. And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened to the salmon stocks. I'll tell you that I worked in the forest industry for about 12 years myself. And some of those places that I did work in I just felt sick to the stomach by doing what I was doing. Many things have changed here since the electricity was brought in. And one time this whole village used to be lined with totem poles, longhouses, and dugout canoes. People used the resources of the forest respectfully. They depict our direct links with the land and our relationships with other tribes and other families. One of the first things that we're really taught about in our culture is respect, and that's depicted by the moon on top of this totem pole here. How it goes is you can't go and harvest any resource at any time of the year. You have to go and obey the laws of nature.
De Indianen, de bosarbeiders, de houthandel en de milieuactivisten. Allemaal beïnvloeden ze het krachtenveld van de plaatselijke politiek. En binnen dit krachtenveld verandert langzaam maar zeker het bosbeleid van de overheid.
For once we have a green forest minister, but unfortunately we don't have a green Ministry of Forest bureaucracy, and that is very difficult to change. But it's coming. We're finally charging the timber companies for mistakes they're making. Now, not stuff from the past, it's now. It's what they're doing now. And I think they are really, many of them are very committed to this change. But again, it's so hard to bring it in on the ground. And many of them don't spend much time on the ground. They don't realize. I come in with these clear-cut photos, the latest disaster weekly, and I think it's a shock to them because they hope to believe what they're told, that things have actually changed when they have not. And it's going to take more pressure and international pressure to bring about those changes.
De milieuproblematiek verenigt de wereld op ongekende schaal. Plaatselijke geschillen krijgen internationale dimensies. Dit geldt ook voor de kaalkap van Claggett Sound. Internationale samenwerking wordt mogelijk gemaakt door internationale milieuorganisaties als Friends of the Earth. Chi Yok-hee Ling houdt zich al jarenlang bezig met de problematiek van het regenwoud. Ze woont een congres bij in Amsterdam.
If we talk to anybody who's doing this kind of work, if you start going through everything, and every day we get more and more information that tells us things are getting worse and worse. And it's no longer just NGOs who are alarming the public. I mean, scientists, even governments, UN agencies themselves are coming out because the ecological crisis is, you cannot deny it anymore. Whether it's North Sea fishing, whether it's the forests in Canada or in the tropics, whether it's toxic waste that we don't know what to do with, these are the real crisis problems which we cannot deny anymore. And this is what we're working with. So at one level it is very depressing because you only get the bad news. And we have to tell people that the news is pretty bad. People always ask us, why don't you give more sort of optimistic alternatives, The problem is alternatives are not allowed to operate or flourish. Or systems which are workable, like people are managing forests or water or having sustainable agriculture in many parts of the South, which we are trying to protect. There are sustainable development models, but the forces that are modernizing and industrializing and making profit are not allowing them to survive.
Chi Yoke-ling heeft meegewerkt aan de oprichting van de World Rainforest Movement, een samenwerkingsverband van plaatselijke milieugroepen. Een aantal Europese milieuorganisaties werkt samen in de ERM, European Rainforest Movement.
It's quite interesting to see the history of the ERM, because the main campaign we started with was a Ban Japan campaign, and it was focused on Mitsubishi, because Mitsubishi was one of the biggest destroyers of the rainforest in the south and also in Sarawak, which was an important case at that time. And then we found out that there were many more things we could campaign on than just Japan, and we started campaigning on tropical forests in general sense, and also on the ITTO, the International Timber Trade Organization, and the World Bank and all those multilateral development banks. And then about 2 years ago we sort of discovered that there were also lots of forests in the north being chopped down, and that basically also the timber trade is just a small part of the whole global timber trade. And we felt that we should also campaign for the forests in the north at an international level. And a lot of groups in Scandinavia, in Alaska, in Canada were fighting already for their forests on a local level and on a national level. And they wanted to become into closer contact with the ERM, who fought also on the international level, on the World Bank and the big institutions level.
Clarkot is the northern local struggle of a northern forest issue that has finally come onto the international agenda, which is long due. And this is something that we feel very good about. And other members within our World Rainforest Movement, like our groups in Japan, the Japan Tropical Forest Action Network, because Japan is one of the biggest buyers of the wood from Canada.
Port Alberni aan de westkust van Vancouver Island is de exporthaven van het hout uit Clackett. Een deel gaat naar Azië. Daar heeft Friends of the Earth een kantoor in Maleisië. Neil Nirmal, de Maleisische bosdeskundige van Friends of the Earth.
Sometime last year I received a letter from a resident in Kellicott Sound in Vancouver Island. They are clearing the old growth forest there from logging activities. Logging concessions are given at the old growth forest, and the old growth forest is being cleared. That is the last of the old growth forest that you find in Canada, which is partly disappearing because of logging concessions. So what I did was I wrote a long letter and I sent them lots of slides and photographs of what's happening here, so that they can use these slides and photographs and information for their campaign to stop the logging activities in Kellicott Sound.
The Clarkot Sound is a very good example of how the southern groups, which had so much of the solidarity of action alerts and letter writing, when we had problems in the south and needed, support for our local struggles, there was tremendous international support.
We wouldn't be where we are today without the international component. Many of us have struggled for so many years to get change, and we still are not getting adequate change. But they are very fearful of the international component, and that pushes governments. They are scared, and it's not just the British Columbia government who controls the resources. It's the Canadian government. We are becoming, an environmental outlaw in the world situation. And I attended the Rio Summit, and I said it to many of the Forestry Canada officials there, and some of them were honest enough to realize that we had this Achilles heel, that we were mismanaging our forests, not just in British Columbia, but right across the country. And how can we preach to countries like Malaysia or other countries, and they knew it as well, and say, look, we're an example, and we can tell you, don't cut all your wood, when we're liquidating all our forests. We can't say that. So obviously international pressure has been tremendously helpful to change. The Forest Practices Code, the scientific panel, we keep saying to the government, if you don't implement these and make them tough, what will the world say? The world is watching.
De plaatselijke milieuorganisaties kunnen zeggen dat ze de wereldmilieubeweging vertegenwoordigen. Want ze hebben een grote achterban die zich ernstig zorgen maakt over de verloedering van het milieu. Plaatselijke milieuorganisaties sluiten zich bij deze beweging aan en vormen internationale netwerken. De internationale samenwerking versterkt hun positie ter plaatse.
My sense is that until we went international, we were just considered a nuisance by the government and by the industry. They ran very denigrating, patronizing sort of advertisements in newspapers saying, "Don't worry, public, everything's really okay," and these people are full of lies. And all of a sudden, we started to have the numbers, the statistics, which supported our arguments, a lot of support from governments and large environmental organizations and the public in Europe, and now we're a threat. Now it's not just patronizing ads, it's an all-out media campaign leveled against us. But the effect has been that they're trying everything to change their image so they can regain their credibility. At this point, I think they realize that in Europe they've lost their credibility. And we've changed from a nuisance to a threat, and that gives us a lot more sway. We've seen all of a sudden a push to smaller clear cuts. That didn't happen because they wanted smaller clear cuts. It's because they needed something to say that was better. And you know, we're seeing the effects. They're moving inches when we need to move yards. But we're starting to see some decent moves towards what we need to have.